Now, I see there are long queues of people wanting to interrogate me. The Methodist Hall Inquisition is about to take place, so I think I will now hand over to questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Back in September of this year, you publicly praised Boris Johnson for his great leadership. Do you think that for our Tory government to remain in power, that Boris needs to be in charge, and that under a Sunak government, the Tories are incapable of winning the public over?
Well, look, this is a brilliantly intelligent audience, and if I were to say to you that the Tories are storming ahead to an election victory, I think you might look askance and think that I wasn't on the level with you. The opinion polls are not good, and it doesn't seem easy to turn them round. I am, however, a Tory MP, and for a Tory MP to admit defeat before an election would be a very foolish thing to do. So I'm not going to go that far, but I do think things look difficult. Yeah, Boris Johnson had the mandate. You see, it should not be, and the constitutional theorists say it is not, but the truth is our system has moved to being a parliamentary presidential one, and people vote for a prime minister. Put it bluntly, I was a means to an end of the people in North East Somerset, not an end in itself. They didn't want me specifically. They voted for me to get Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister. And for a party then to get rid of that leader without going back to the electorate, I think was very unwise. I said so at the time. I think we should have gone into an election with Boris Johnson to see whether people still wanted to give him a mandate and trust democracy rather than carving it up in Westminster rooms and smoke-free rooms nowadays, but not dissimilar from the smoke-filled rooms of old. So yes, I think Boris Johnson would have given us a better chance at the next election because he had the mandate.
With over 57% of benefits claimants living in food insecurity, and you voting against raising benefits over 50 times, what would you say to the most vulnerable voters who feel like their treatment by the Tory party has been at best callous indifference?
I would completely and utterly disagree with you. Poverty in this country has been reduced since 2010, as you know perfectly well. Benefits have been uprated with inflation every year since 2010. The universal credit has simplified the process for applying for benefits for people. The basic state pension for people who are now 70 or under and have retired is significantly higher than the old state pension was, lifting pensioners out of poverty. So the Conservatives' track record on reducing poverty is very strong. And what you say just isn't the case. Benefits have gone up to ensure that people can maintain a standard of living, and even with high inflation, next April, benefits will go up in line with the September inflation figure as normal, even though the September figure was much higher than the October figure, in recognition that it's the least well-off in society who are most harmed by inflation, and why it is so important to squeeze out inflation, and the inflation that was caused by a number of factors, but partly by protecting the economy through COVID, decisions that had to be taken. So no, I dispute what you're saying. I think it's fundamentally wrong.
Conservative Party are all about decency, but how does that square up to creating a hostile environment for asylum seekers? And how can it be decent to potentially leave the European Convention on Human Rights and thereby lower standards?
I think the hostile environment for immigrants came in under the last Labour government and was a terrible, terrible mistake that led to the Windrush scandal. It was an awful thing to do, to assume that people who had been here for years were not allowed to be here legitimately. As for asylum seekers, my concern is that people are taking incredibly dangerous journeys. People die in the Channel. They are being brought here by people traffickers who make huge amounts of money from trading in human misery. I think as a matter of law and order, and to stop people trafficking, we need to stop the small boats. I was strongly supportive of the approach taken by David Cameron to bring asylum seekers directly from Syrian camps, from refugee camps bordering Syria during the height of the civil war in Syria, so that you weren't bringing in those who were brought by people traffickers, you weren't bringing in those who had raised large amounts of money to come here, you were bringing basically women and children who were at the greatest risk. And I think we do need to have an asylum policy that brings in those who are most vulnerable. I think we have a moral duty to do that. I fully support our carrying out our historic duty to the people of Hong Kong, facing the breach of the joint declaration by the Chinese government. I fully support our support for people coming from Ukraine. All of these things were right things to do. And the Conservative government had policy to help deal with those. I think people coming by small boats and allowing these very dangerous journeys is the wrong thing to do. And this isn't about not disrespecting asylum seekers, it's about the way asylum seekers get here. And I don't want them to be coming across the channel in small boats.